pendulum keeps swinging. Vocational education gains support through the 1900s. Two speeches in 1908 appeared to be the high points. What were they? The first one was delivered by President Theodore Roosevelt to the Department of Superintendents. This is the group that contains all the superintendents of schools. I don't know why they use this title. It's confusing. I believe they have changed that today. In his speech, Roosevelt said, education should be directed toward training boys and girls back to the farm and shop. And the people cheered and said, the president is behind us. The president is all for vocational education. Charles W. Eliot speaks to that NSPIE group, National Society for the Preservation of Industrial Education. And in his speech, he advocates trade schools for students, unfortunately, obliged to leave school by 14 or earlier, and for students identified by elementary teachers on the basis of probable destiny. And as that little kid said when he went up to Joe Jackson, when Joe was a member of the Black Sox, which threw the World Series, the little kid said, say it ain't so, Joe. We could say now to Charles, say it ain't so, Charles, because Charles never believed in this back when he was in his committee of 10 days. He wanted education to be the same for everyone. Now he's talking about elementary teachers identifying kids on the basis of probable destiny. That's like playing Spot the Loony. I don't know if you're old enough to have watched Monty Python, but they used to have a little bit called Spot the Loony. It was like a multiple choice thing, and they'd give you 4 or 5 little vignettes, and the loony was always the naked guy playing the piano. Anyway, this was a complete change. This is supposedly the moment when the age of Eliot was ended by Eliot. His comment kicked off a national debate over the question, who is vocational education for? In his speech, Eliot had identified 2 types: potential dropouts and those identified on the basis of probable destiny. Other suggestions followed. Some people said vocational education could be a solution to the dropout problem. Now, this is slightly different from number 1. It's pretty close to number 1, but the kids in number 1 have to drop out, and they're going to anyway. The kids down here don't have to, but they might drop out unless they're offered something of a practical nature. So there is a slight difference. Maybe up there in number 1, maybe the father dies and the kid has to go out and support the family. Down there in number 3, the kid doesn't have to quit, but might because he's bored. This one causes groans out there, but one of the original founders of the NSPIE, James Parton Haney, wrote an article in which he said vocational education might be the best answer for kids who are duller mentally than their mates. Now, I don't know any way you can get around that. He said it in print. Duller mentally than their mates. Guidance counselors are always sending the kids who can't cut it academically to the vocational classes, the assumption being if you can't work with your mind, you can work with your hands. So this idea has been around a while. Finally, and this is back to Robert Coram now, this is the answer for the masses, the great unwashed, those scads and scads of immigrants who are coming into the country that the schools seem very unprepared for. What can we give them? Let's give them a vocational skill. So education was seen as the answer for the great unwashed, the masses. The Smith-Hughes Act was the crowning glory of the vocational education movement, thanks to the efforts of now NSPIE Secretary Charles Prosser. Remember him? He's the guy that came with Sneddon. He's now Secretary of the NSPIE, and in that role lobbies tremendously for the passage of the Smith-Hughes Act. What does Smith-Hughes do? It does for the secondary schools what the Moral Land Grant Acts did for colleges. It gets agriculture into the high schools. It gets industrial trades into the high schools. And for the ladies, it gets home economics into the high schools. Achievements of the vocational education movement: trade schools, continuation schools, and comprehensive high schools. Vocational guidance. This is another little contribution of Charles Prosser. Lobbied mightily for a vocational counselor to be available in the schools. It's another boost to federal aid to education. The Smith-Hughes Act provides money for public education. That's a foot of the federal government in the door. Provides for early, or let's say earlier, differentiation of students. We're going to sort these kids into career paths now. Forget at the end of high school. We're going to sort them in the elementary school if we can. More achievements of the vocational education program. It actually reinforced the elective principle by perhaps providing a few more elective options. It widened the gap between practical and academic subjects. And then, sneaking through the side door, hastened the emergence of a new institution that was going to be called a junior high school. The story on the junior high school perhaps goes back to the Committee on the Economy of Time. It was appointed in 1905. Its charge was to cut the pre-college years by 2. Now you remember, I think that the community college people had been arguing, take 2 years and put them back in the high schools, or what are we going to do with those 2 years that don't really belong? And if we're going to put the freshman and sophomore year of the college back into the high school, is there anything in the high school we can cut? So this is consistent with the Kingsbury report, and it's in harmony with junior college goals. Can we cut the pre-college years by 2? I love this now. The Committee on the Economy of Time was appointed in 1905. 6 years later, how's that for economy of time? It reported, and its answer was, no, we can't cut anything. But the first real junior highs were established in the home districts of several of those committee members, specifically in Columbus, Ohio, Los Angeles, California, and Berkeley, California. So there must have been something going on in those meetings that led people to consider don't we want a transition institution between the elementary school, let's say the 6th grade, and the high school, let's say the 9th grade? Don't we want some kind of bridge there, which is going to be a little bit different from elementary school, a little bit different, but leading to the high school? And in that transition area, we can take care of a lot of things.